John,
Angie.
you're fired.
What?
You're fired.
You can't fire me. I quit. What
Oh.
is this? What's this about, Donald? Is this...
Well, that's funny. Let me ask you, have you ever had to terminate a coaching client?
Yeah, sure.
So how did you handle it?
Carefully. But it sounds like a great topic for this episode, so let's get started.
All right, sounds good to me.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. Gosh, sacking your clients. It's sensitive, especially for someone like me who really does not like confrontational situations. But that feels very confrontational.
John is the T-Rex from Toy Story. I don't like confrontation.
I don't know, do people like Joan? I guess there must be people who actually do enjoy confrontation who maybe get a thrill from it. But I'm not one of them. But I probably do what most people do in that situation of catastrophizing it a little bit and thinking it's going to be way worse than it actually is. So that, I think that's always the worry with these things. We nearly always imagine these things to go far worse because we're having to have a difficult conversation with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that what you said, though, is important. Like the first thing you said, when I say, how do you handle it? Your first answer is carefully. And you do want to handle it carefully because you have a responsibility as a coach to be the professional, I think. But also, you don't want people running around and like defaming you in any way. Oh, she was such a this and he was such a that.
I've had that story.
I do. Yeah. So tell us about that. Tell us a little bit about that crazy story. We don't get all of it, but some of it.
For sure. I didn't actually fire that client. That was just an awkward situation, but it did come from having to have a difficult conversation because the client wasn't showing up, the client wasn't taking action, and I was very frustrated working with this person of like week after week, showing up for the calls at least, but not doing anything. And I felt like we were wasting our time, that she was wasting her time and money, and I probably could have put it a little more tactfully than I did. But she didn't take it well, let's just say that. But I discovered, I think probably weeks afterwards, that she, under a pseudonym, had gone onto various Facebook groups that were connected to the organization that I was working with and posted all sorts of crap about me particularly and about the company and anyone she knew who was involved in it, and was really slating the company and me personally, left, right, and center. And this got back to the company, who then informed me and said, do you know who this person is? Do you recognize this name? And I said, no, but there's something familiar about this. And when I went and dug a little deeper into the social media profiles, I know who this is, and realized it was that client under a different name. And so it did eventually get sorted out. All the nasty posts got taken down. I didn't feel like the company handled that incredibly well, if I'm being honest about it, because they assigned her to another coach. She should have been fired as a client. For doing that kind of thing, she should have just been fired as a client. But they instead tried to save her as a client.
I think that's a good point. So here's the thing. Let's differentiate things. If you have your own business, right? Yeah. You do what you want to do. And we'll talk about some best practices there. If you're working for a coaching company, obviously you have a job there and you have to handle things maybe differently than you normally would have, because of course they're just looking to, let's just smooth it over and retain that client. We don't want the bad press. We want to keep
They don't want a
making
refund.
money.
They don't want a refund either. So yeah, there's that.
No, exactly. Exactly. The next, who wants to refund? Nobody wants to refund. But so I think there's a different set of guidelines there that you
Sure.
don't really have control over, to be honest, right? The
I'd
company
agree.
does. But if you're a coach that's starting out or you're a coach that's been around for a minute, you must have, if you've been around, had that moment. So let's talk about what kind of scenarios, like why would we want to terminate a contract with a client? What are some of the reasons? So you already mentioned that they're showing up, but they're not showing up. They're not doing any of the work. For sure.
Yeah.
That requires a difficult conversation. I love those conversations though. And it's not always with the intention of termination, right? It's,
Right.
hey, you know what? Can we take 10 minutes today? Because I want to talk to you. Oh, sure, Angie. What's going on? I just want to know. Are you still serious about these things? We first started working together. You mentioned these goals. Do you feel like you're actively working? So it really becomes a coaching moment because sometimes people don't really know that they're not showing up. So you really do have to be a check-in. You cannot be aggressive and just go, I'm going to show them. No, because then you'll have zero clients for sure.
Let me just be clear, the situation I had, we had several of those kind of coaching moments where we were trying to really get to the bottom of what was actually going on. And ultimately, it became like banging my head against a brick wall. I think that became I think where it personally affected me was feeling that I didn't at that time have I felt like I was lacking some level of coaching knowledge in how to deal with this or how to get a result. How do I get a result with somebody like this who really is resistant to taking any kind of action whatsoever? And I think that's where it pushed me to, I think the only way we're going to get anywhere is if I get really lay down the law and saying, this is it. Either do this stuff or don't bother coming back. So it had been a build up to this. It wasn't just like one session. I'm like, all right, we're done. You're out. Yeah. So you see those, but I think generally those situations are exceptional that you would find that someone would even pay for coaching and come into it and really not even try to take action. And again, when you are working for yourself, hopefully you're going to have had some kind of onboarding and introduction and discovery with the person to know whether they are the kind of person who takes action or whether the kind of person who's going to be difficult to work with. At which point, we've talked about that before in discovery calls. You can stop it before it gets that far.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because very early on in our journey here at the coaching clinic, I remember talking about one of the clients that I've had where, I mean, he was absolutely impossible. And I did not terminate him. But I have to be honest, when we had our discovery call and our clarity session, he was honest. He was like, I just can't seem to get out of my own way. And so I think as a coach, we all kind of approach things with nothing but positivity. Okay, that's definitely a pain point. We need to work into that and we should do that. I will tell you with certainty that it was so frustrating for me and at that time I did work for myself and for another company. And I went to the director and said, listen to a couple of these calls because I don't know what else to do. I didn't know what else to do. And she came back. I think she listened to 3 of our sessions and she was like, we need to get rid of him. He's never going to do this. And I was like, okay. And I was thinking, you're going to get rid of him? No, I had to. So it was like uncomfortable. And he dug his heels in. And I was very diplomatic, as tough as we make me out to be here on the show. I was very diplomatic. Don't laugh. I was very diplomatic and I was honest and said, I know you're struggling and I'm struggling to help you. I was very honest and transparent because we have broken things down into the smallest of pieces and still that becomes huge. And he was like, no, I need to keep doing this, even if it's not working. And I was like, okay, far be it for me to tell. But I also had said then, what's the direction? So I'm not going to get into all of that, but it really isn't just about, it's so frustrating for me because I know everybody out there that has coached has had frustrating clients or frustrating sessions. We have to manage ourselves on that. We have a responsibility to that. So when is it appropriate? And I really think it's an individual decision, right? Because when I'm ready to terminate, I might say, for example, refer somebody and say, you know what, I think I might not be the right fit for you, but I can refer you to somebody else. Are you interested? And I might refer that person to John, and John might knock it out of the park with them, because sometimes it's just truly not a fit.
Would you refer someone who was that challenging to work with? Because I think
I might, yeah.
I might, but I would probably check in with the person I was referring to first and say, hey, look, I've got this person.
There
Do
you
you
go,
feel
John.
up to that? Do you feel up to that?
This really smells. Smell it. No, of course I would do the check-in, and I wouldn't just be like giving out phone numbers and stuff. I would have a consult with the coach or whomever I was referring to and say, listen, I haven't had any luck. This is what I've tried. These are the challenges. Do you want to or not? And I would probably do that before I mentioned referring to the client, just in case the person said, absolutely not, I'm not interested, right? Because now I'd then have to go back and say to the person, oh, sorry, they don't want you either. I'm giggling today. My coffee had no bourbon in it, I swear.
Let me ask you something then. When it comes to potentially firing client, what would be the main thing you'd probably fire them for?
Disrespect. I think the one thing I can't work through with a client is if they're disrespectful to me, right?
Yeah.
Meaning, are they cursing? Are they cursing at me, or are they just cursing in general? Because I do have some people that are like, oh, I'm sorry, I said that F-bomb. Is that okay? And I'm like, have at it. But if they're cursing me out because they're having a bad day or they're frustrated, that is you're done. We're done.
Yeah, I'd say that's the unforgivable sin in coaching relationship is that disrespect your coach. And I would say something that perhaps comes into that to a lesser extent, but is still part of it, is people just not showing up. What we would often just call no-shows in the coaching world, where they book the session and they don't show up for it. Or they stop booking the sessions. And the second one maybe is a little different. You're going to reach out and say, hey, look, you need to book your sessions in, check in. You're going to maybe follow up a few times. But maybe like me, you might have had those situations in the past where you get those people who just go incommunicado and they will not respond no matter what you do. You have to terminate the relationship. But what choice do you have? They have essentially already done that. And so I'd say in terms of terminating or firing your clients, the times where that has happened the most has been from people who either just aren't showing up at all or booking in the sessions, or booking in the sessions and then no showing the sessions, leaving you sat there waiting for them a bunch of times, which I think is very disrespectful. I will just say no.
Listen, that is definitely, a different form of disrespect, but I think my perspective on that might be a little bit different. And I'm not saying that for you. It's obviously you're referring to like habitual, right? No shows and not just the one time.
No, that's one-offs.
Correct. So to your point, one of the things that I consider is when they stopped showing up, whether it was the no-show or lack of booking, what was happening in our sessions, because that will happen. What my experience has been is that'll happen when we hit a pain point, when it really, when we start to do the work. Don't be surprised if people start to not show up. It has happened. I mean, I wouldn't say it's been common for me, but when I hit that, like when I strike gold or I hit the water main and it starts to gush a little bit, they start running for cover. It's not uncommon. So I will usually send out a note or two to them if I don't hear from them and they're not booking, and say, hey, I understand. And I go right to it, letting them know that I know our last session was really powerful, painful, intense, whatever the word is. But I think that's what we need, right? So if you want to continue this change, understand now we just work through it, right? We already ripped off the Band-Aid. Let's keep going so that you can. And usually that acknowledgement gets them to, so I don't terminate quickly, I would say.
No, I wouldn't either. It may depend on what point the client is in, because there are also situations, especially like we've talked about auto renewals before. We've done an episode on that for anyone who wants to go and check that. That I over the years, I've many times worked with clients who are in auto renewal programs. So very often they will actually go incommunicado rather than have a conversation with you about why they may be thinking they don't want to renew. And because again, that fear of confrontation comes up, and they don't want to have to tell the coach, actually, I'm not going to renew with you. So it's a difficult conversation that they probably imagine the coach is going to probably do what the coach will do and say, why is that? Let's talk about it, and maybe try and convince them to stay. But that's not really necessarily the coach's job. Of course, we want our clients to stay in coaching, but only if they want to, and only if they're going to benefit from it, not because we want to get their money off them. So I think that's definitely something that starts to come up. I've seen in group coaching as well, people just start to not show because they haven't taken the actions and they're embarrassed. This is more of a group thing, but it does happen in one-to-ones as well. They're embarrassed about not having done all their actions, not followed through on all their commitments, and they don't want to have to confront that in front of the group. And most people will deal with that. I always try and frame it up on those calls about how important it is that we're not looking, when we check in on your actions, it's not to judge you. It's not so you can beat yourself up if you didn't do things perfectly. It's to check in and see, where's the room for improvement? How do we grow? Because none of us are perfect, and we're all looking for growth and development, and we're all here to support each other on that. So even if you don't get everything done, or even if you have the worst week and you're thinking, oh crap, I didn't get all my actions done, show up anyway. Because that's growth. Showing up even when it's difficult is growth, is development.
I think us having grace for a client, it teaches them to have grace for themselves, right? To not be so judgmental, to understand that everything is a process and that we're not looking for the perfect outcome. And even if it doesn't, even if you do fall a little short from a goal, if you left the starting line, you're already ahead of where you were when you got here. So to that little point, I am always I say this, I'm not your mama. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to tell you, wag my finger and say, okay, little Johnny, you didn't do your work. I go straight into, and they're shocked. I think that there's a shock there, like, what? He didn't get angry or disappointed in me. And I'm like, all right, so let's see, what did you do? What worked? I don't even think about it. I don't even talk about it. Unless it's like a habitual thing and it's excuses, then we talk about that. But, but that isn't necessarily the space. I think, did you ever have, I wanted to ask you this, I was thinking about this earlier, because you have coached coaches, as I have. I've trained coaches. And when I talk about this topic with them, it is hilarious to me how many times I have a couple of people that go, what do you care? Because for me, I don't know about you, but my coaching programs are paid in advance. It is not a pay as you go, because then it lacks commitment.
I'm paying in advance as well. Always pay up front.
Yeah. I've had people say to me, what care if they show up or not? What do you care? You're getting paid anyway. And I'm like, well, you and I need to talk. I think I will definitely have a little side conversation there, because the process, if you're a true coach at heart, yes, you want to get paid for what you do. But I'm a surgeon. I'm not going to just do surgery on people and take their money and say, here, I cut you open, I sewed you up, and I told you I did something and I didn't do anything. That's not how I do business. I'm not just here to take people's money. I'm here to get paid what I'm worth for doing the job that I do, right? But have you ever had that? Have you ever had people say that to you?
No.
Okay.
But it has crossed my mind. It has crossed my mind. Julia, it's just you. I don't think anyone's ever said that to me. I don't recall if they did. But the difference of, you always have to think about gym memberships. Maybe there's a reason for that. But there's a different, most of us have probably had memberships in different gyms over time, and maybe had different experiences about how they kept it. And maybe we had different levels of commitment to show how we will show up. Some gyms are just going to take your money and don't care if you show up or not.
Absolutely.
But there's going to be those places that will actually send you a message or an SMS, WhatsApp, or text, or call you even, if they see that you haven't actually been to the gym in a while. That feels like a level of care that I think probably coaches could manage to do as well for their clients.
Sure, of course.
And I do think one of the things that This is possibly more the case for people who have their own business as coaches, but I think it's just as important, even if you're working with a coaching organization, if you're able to follow up with people and check in with what's going on. I think that's one of the, we talk about one of the biggest differences that shows people that you care as a coach and that you're not just about the money. And I do think it's something we probably all don't do as well as we could. And not saying that you need to, like I say, you don't want to be their mother or their parent. You don't need to be that. You're not their caretaker. But checking in with them, that's something a little different. We check in with our friends. We check in with people we care about.
Sure.
If we care about our clients, and hopefully we do, otherwise, why are we just working with them for the dollars? Otherwise, then check in with them and give yourself the opportunity to fix that up and set that up. I think even if they're going through a challenging time, they're far more likely to develop a longer term loyalty to you as their coach if you show that you care about them in between sessions or when they're having a bit of a challenging time that they don't even feel that they can talk to you about just yet. I mean, that's my feeling on it, because I think otherwise they will be the ones wanting to fire you.
Well, listen, into that, I was thinking this because we've talked about refunds and things in the past. Yeah. And one of the things that is in my contract, and it's worded appropriately, and I discuss it outright. I don't just say, here's the contract if you have any questions. I say, I will be sending you a contract. The important part of that contract that you must, and I make them initial. There's a special initial just for that particular part of that. And it's that I don't do refunds. I don't give refunds. Unless it's me, I haven't had to use it, but if it's a circumstance that is from my end, whatever it may be and why it may be, personal reasons like, oh, I had to have surgery or something, I will give a refund. But I do not give refunds. Now, why? Because I don't want in the back of somebody's mind, not because I don't want to give them the money back, not because I'm trying to hold their money hostage, but there's a higher level of commitment when somebody has that feeling of, I have to do this, right? So if they've committed to the financial piece, for some reason, that tends to keep them more like, all right, I committed to this. I have to do it. And I should do it well because she's not charging me $50 a session. So I should make the most of this. Now, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have the conversation. If somebody was really unhappy, I might say to them, you know what, that's fine, but I'm not giving you your money back. So again, different conversation, but I think it helps to keep the sessions honest and keep people a little bit more committed because that's it.
I would look, there's a saying, I'm no refunds to a point. And for one-off sessions that I sometimes do with people, no refunds for sure. Again, unless it's something that where I've messed up. But for clients who are probably going to be working with me for longer than that, I will generally say, if in the first month, either of us decide that this isn't really working out or getting us where we want to be, then sure, I'll give you a full refund. We part as friends, shake hands and no hard feelings. Is that okay? That usually sets people's mind up because we do want to take away some of the risk for them. And I think that can sometimes be a decision that stops people getting over the line with sales in terms of being a coach. That if you can take away some of the risk for them of thinking, okay, I've actually got a bit of time to figure this out, even after my decision is made. It's so rare because usually in my experience, the decision that they want to quit comes up around renewal time, not in the first month of coaching. So if it isn't working out then, it does mean that you've messed up in the discovery process a bit and there's some stuff to learn from that. What could you maybe change in the discovery process to figure that out better? But I would say as well, it is a good way to help get some of the sales over the line. So you may not want to go completely down the track of going no refunds whatsoever under any circumstances, each to their own.
Yeah, no, listen, knock on wood, I haven't had to. And honestly, if I go into the first session and I go, oh my gosh, what is happening here? This is not the person I spoke to during my discovery call. I might say, okay, but I haven't had that experience yet. And you can't prepare for a re-experience. But I think what it comes down to is us being able to, as coaches, having the professionalism to know when it's time to terminate a relationship, a contract. with somebody and wanting to make sure that we do it as diplomatically as we possibly can for a multitude of reasons, just because simply it's the right thing to do, whether it's not the right fit, or we talked about earlier, somebody's being really disrespectful, things that we're not willing to tolerate, or they're just not showing up. No, those are, to me, that's grounds for termination. So.
Yeah, I can't really think of any other situations off the top of my head where I would be like, all right, that's not going to work out. It's not going to fly in the coaching relationship. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any. What would you say?
No, and something just came to me because I had a client years ago. I didn't terminate the client, but I had to set the record straight. Let me just say that this particular client, he was not from America, which doesn't matter, right? That's not the point. But he had and this is fine, very different perspectives about the woman's place.
Okay.
And that's fine, heritage and all of that. So he didn't intentionally disrespect me, but he would always say things like, you wouldn't really understand that because you're a woman. And it wasn't things that I couldn't understand. I don't know, dare I say this, John? No, I wouldn't understand about having a penis because I don't have one. Right? But it was, did I just say that?
You did.
I don't think that's going to make it to the air, but okay. But anyway, but he would say things that I could very easily have related to. And he would just make this like these little, you wouldn't get that. You're a woman. You're a woman. You're a woman. And finally, and he was a great client, but I finally said to him, let me ask you a question. Can we pause there for a minute? And I took it in the moment instead of going back and saying, you said this 20 times. Why do you think I wouldn't understand that? Because I'm a woman. And he thought he had this great, and I came back and said, are you okay with the teaching moment here? Yeah, sure. And I said, here was my experience with that as a woman, and true story. And he was like, oh, so his habit was to just be like, because you're a woman. Now, that could have warranted like serious, like termination, because I was feeling, and I was like, I have to shut that down, right? Because I'm being somehow, and I hate the flippin' word, triggered, because I was like, it was like sending up my antenna going, what? Why do you think that I wouldn't understand that? But he understood in that moment, the redirection, that let me show you that I do understand. And I asked him, I said, do I have permission to call you out the next time you say, because you're a woman? And he was like, yeah. And I mean, it happened a lot, but I didn't terminate him because I knew it really wasn't coming from a place where he was being judgmental. It was just a belief system. So I, as a coach, needed to understand it, even though I didn't agree with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But another coach, I know coaches that I shared that story with when it was happening, and they were like, oh, him, get rid of him. And I was like, no, I don't think so. So it could be, though, or something like that, where there's just such a difference of opinion that, I can't do this.
Well, look, I think I've probably said to you before that I've worked with clients from all around the world, from all sorts of different religions. Some of them with beliefs that would probably not be compatible with us being friends in the real world. And there's some cultures and religions are particularly homophobic, and that's what I'm really talking about there. And does that mean I can't work with people who are like that? I absolutely can, unless it starts to come into conflict with my values. That's where it starts doing that. That actually starts to come into the whole thing of disrespect as well, because even if they don't know about your life personally, making assumptions that you think a certain way or that you naturally agree with them, that's disrespect as well.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, in that particular case, that was probably one of the most obvious. I mean, I've had people make little comments, and I've had women make comments and I will call them out the same. It wasn't about me. They might say something about men or a corporate ladder, and it's still a man's world and all the things. And I might have to check in on that as well. So it's not one-sided. But I do think that it's important to recognize what you said, is that sometimes we do interact with people who, to one degree or another, have a very different value and belief system than we do. And remember me talking to you about the client who identified as a vagina? Like, I coached that woman for a long time. Look at you, your face getting red.
Because I don't know is there any more genitalia you'd care to mention on the episode
Oh
today?
my God, I don't know what to say today. All right, you just need to edit that stuff out. I don't know what to say, but that was a real thing that happened. I guess I could have.
It was a real thing that happened. We're getting all of it in today's episode. But
You didn't know that this was going to be 10th grade and about
I
all
should
the
have.
things.
I should have mentioned that before we even started. But look, it's one thing we've talked before about. Now, I've had slightly problematic, or people who have deeper issues going on that sometimes come out in very inappropriate ways on things like coaching calls. That's a very different matter.
Or during a podcast episode.
Or during a podcast recording. It's a very different matter that needs to be handled a bit differently, but you are going to sack them probably because it's just not appropriate for you to be working with them when they need something else. So that's a very different situation, I think, to what we're talking about. But realistically, if you had a client say you get on great, some of that, and then you get into their goals with them and things like that, and it turns out that their goals are in conflict with your values, you can't work with them. You're going to feel like shit about it. You're going to be in that sort of lawyer's position of having to work with try and get the guilty person off in court. You have to, it might be your job, but you have to go against your own ethical instincts to do that.
I think we should actually make a whole entire episode out of that, because I think that is something that the more you work with, the more people you work with, the more you're going to find that. And it's not just about, we're just diverse. Of course, diversity is awesome. But when you get to speaking with somebody who at their core, it just doesn't fit, it can be problematic in your coaching. Even if you don't realize it, it's going to show up. So how do you manage it?
There is that thing as well of, you may, in the course of coaching, find out things about your client that could cause you to lose complete respect for them.
Yeah.
How do you then keep working with them in a coaching relationship where you're supposed to be helping them grow and develop? Because it's not your job to change them. It's you can be their guide, but it's their job. And they would actually even have to want to change, and they may not. So that might be something that gets you into a position the more you coach, the more you will start to encounter these kinds of situations.
Yep, absolutely. I think becoming a coach, I probably would end with this, has opened my eyes to how different we really are, and how, this sounds a little bit ridiculous, but how different from my world or any world that I have been a part of growing up, how different people really are, right? Perceptions and beliefs and stories, and a lot of it is the same. Right? That's where we all come together and we understand each other as humans. But so many things that I might hang up from a call and turn around and go, wow, that was really interesting. And I'm not saying it from a judgmental space. I'm saying it from, wow, I didn't see that. Right? It's not always negative. Sometimes it's, wow, what a great alternative perspective that this person shared, that I actually learned something today. That can happen, by the way, a lot.
Do you think, to follow on from that before we do wind this down, do you think as a coach that you at least need to decide what your threshold boundaries are with clients? And do you feel that they need to be expressed to your clients as well? I think you said before, I'm sure I've said this to clients as well, I don't do relationship coaching. I don't do, these are the things that I won't do with you. That to some degree is a threshold boundary, right? But what do you think?
So do I? I don't think I set any boundaries, and I think the reason that I don't is because I don't know yet. I don't know this person. I don't know the stories. I don't know how, I might say I don't talk about this, but let's just say the relationship pops up. And I will say to people, I will coach you on your behavior, but this right now is hearsay. There's not another person here present that we're working together. So we need to shift this a little bit and talk about you. So I don't think I said it in advance, but there have been times during the course of the journey with a client where I've had to say, okay, let's draw this line, because I can't coach somebody that's not here.
I feel like that's something that has evolved for me over years of coaching. You figure these things out, you figure out what the boundaries are. But I can certainly think of coaching situations I've had where I wished I already had that figured out and just to be able to say, not have to go away and think about, did you just cross a big boundary here? Now, sometimes it's very clear when a boundary's been crossed and it needs to be addressed. But yeah, so there are times when I can directly think, yeah, I probably wish I'd had that stuff figured out in advance, but it's not easy to do. And probably is something you'll figure out along the way where the boundaries are.
Absolutely. Until you experience something, I'm not sure you could prepare for it. It really is that cliche, like you don't know what you don't know. So you might even set a boundary, and then if it presents during the course, you might actually say, oh, I can maneuver and navigate through this somehow, some way. But then there might be something that you didn't plan for and you are completely uncomfortable and you realize that it's affecting you. Because let's just face it, everybody, like the truth is you are still human, even though you're a coach. So you cannot go in and pretend that you have this shield of armor around you where nothing's ever going to affect you. That's just not possible. Whether you cry with a client, right? That used to be something that I would be like, I'm never going to get emotional with a client because I was taught by somebody that wasn't a good practice. And then I had a client who lost a child and there was no possibility that I was going to sit there stone-faced and go, so let's talk about the birds today. Not, absolutely not. So anyway, so I just feel like for me, it's more about flow and discovering those things and how I would handle them going forward.
I agree. Okay, I think we have some level of consensus there. It's an interesting topic. I think I could certainly think of a few other aspects that we could go and explore, but I think they'll come up in other areas.
Hey, John.
That we're going to talk about.
You're still fired.
Well. No. You can't fire me. I quit. Not really. We'll be back again. But
really bad. We're teasing.
If you have thoughts about firing your class, maybe you have some experiences you're thinking, oh, this is an experience that we didn't talk about. We'd love to hear it. And so, get in touch with us. You can leave us, it's free to do, but you can leave us a voice message for the show. You can do it on your laptop, so as you have a microphone. But go to speakpipe.com/the Coaching Clinic podcast, and you can leave us a voicemail there, and we will absolutely pick you on the show. And in the meantime, have an amazing week. We will be back next time. Who knows what we'll be talking about on our next episode? Tune in and find out.
Bye for now.